everybody, to another conversation here at The World Can Wait. We're continuing the conversation this week on drug culture. We're going to be talking about it and the different aspects of it. And one of the things that I've been thinking about was for those of you who follow politics or anything like that, there was a candidate, Joe Jorgensen, and one of the things that she said that I found interesting was we don't have a drug problem in America, we have a prohibition problem. And so I invited my two guests up here so that we can kind of talk about that and kind of just explore the realities of that, whether or not our issue is legalization, prohibition, like how we treat drugs on a personal level, on a systemic level, how that plays into and nurtures drug culture. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna open us up in some prayer, and then we're just gonna jump right in. God, we just thank you for the opportunity to have these wonderful conversations. Sometimes they're uncomfortable, but we need to be having them. And so I thank you for this platform to be having them and for people that are willing to come on and have them with us. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. All right. So, uh, prohibition versus legalization. Where do you guys stand on that? Like, do you agree with? Oh, you can't hear me. That's interesting. Keldon, can you guys hear me? No.
Charles, we can hear you on the stream. We can't hear you in the Zoom call, but I will go ahead and answer your question. When it comes down to prohibition, obviously it doesn't work. We've been going at this whole war on drugs thing for 52 years. And every time that we take a step in the direction of fighting the war on drugs, cartels and terrorists make more money than they did previously. And the number of people on drugs has only increased. The amount of drugs coming across the border has only increased. It's all coming in through, well, a grand majority comes through legal ports of entry. So it's not even about they're getting around the system. It's coming straight through our wide open doors, and prohibition just doesn't work. It didn't work for alcohol, and it's just, one, Americans don't like prohibition, and two, humans don't like prohibition. So
Um.
I didn't hear the question, but I can follow up on what Chris said. I can hear you, Chris, but I can't hear Charlie.
Oh Jesus.
But I agree with Chris full-heartedly. Prohibition doesn't work. It never has in any country, in any shape or any form, honestly. And it's led to slaughter of lots of different people over different cultures and time. And like Chris said, since the war on drugs started, I mean, the only noticeable change in our countries has been, the increased rate of people being incarcerated. Since Nixon started the war on drugs, the population and the prison system went from about 250,000 people countrywide to, at some points, over 5 million people countrywide. And the amount of money that the legal system has to put out annually to take care of the people that they're arresting is substantial, as much as $451 billion per year in some cases.
Can you guys hear me now?
yeah, yes, we
Yes.
can.
Okay. Oh man, I don't even remember what the question was. I don't even know what your answers were. I'm just sitting there like, all right, do I want to fix this and have everybody see me doing all the stuff, or like, how are we gonna do this? All right, I'm fixing it. This is okay. What was my question, Chris? And then what was y'all's
Your
answers?
your question was, how do we feel about prohibition, and
Okay,
our current and our views on it. So
prohibition doesn't work. Is that where we're at?
I believe that we're unanimous in this.
Okay. Okay. Prohibition does not work. So what do we do? Is legalization the answer? Like just 100% legalization of all drugs? Because one of the things that if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure that's what Joe Jorgensen was saying. Like legalizing everything. And I remember like first hearing it thinking, like everything? And she's like, yes, everything. Like even meth. Because would you rather have and Andrew, you kind of brought this up earlier. Would you rather have, you know, Joe down the street cooking meth unsafe in this environment where, he's a risk to himself and others, or Johnson and Johnson making your now well maybe that's a bad example. But I mean, like you get it. So is
Listen, Johnson
legalization
Johnson made the COVID vaccine into one shot. You know why? Why not? Maybe they could streamline meth, make it a little bit. That's a terrible thing to say. I'm sorry.
you're gonna
So,
get canceled?
we what I'll say about that is that we know for sure that prohibition doesn't work. Anybody who has a mind, anybody who's ever read an article in a book or on the internet, knows for sure that prohibition doesn't work. So the next question you have to think is, well, what do you try? What do you try to make the country a better and or safer place for people who are going through these issues? And to be honest, in my mind, the next logical step is it would be total legalization to an extent. And total legalization to an extent being allowing people to buy a product that's been made properly and safely, use in a properly and safe place, and provide the reactionary status to it, i.e., rehabilitation programs and things of that nature. And not only will it cut down on people's deaths from bad product that they buy, but it will also save our government, incredible amounts of money on incarceration fees and other things and that they have to go through.
Okay. So what? Maybe I missed it, but what's the extent that it's legal up to?
So in 2001, Portugal, the country Portugal, introduces 3200 law, and I can't really get into all the details of it, but basically it legalized all recreational use of every drug at the time known to man. And with that, over a 5-year period, they did a bunch of studies throughout the country, and they found that not only did the crime rate drop by nearly a quarter, but also that drug use did not raise in any major category at all over a 5-year period. And with that came a lot of sensibility for people who were on the fence about drug use. People who were already addicted to drugs were able to go seek help because the revenue that they took from taxing those products, they put right back into a rehabilitation system. But the cost of a rehabilitation center is significantly less than the incarceration system, especially the incarceration system that we have in America. That's a whole nother topic. But the funding made a huge difference for people's lives. And drug use has actually dropped by almost 5% in Portugal since 2001. And has, in my opinion, been a really great thing for their country.
Christopher, legalization? That's the answer?
um, yes, and to a point, right? I I'm a firm believer of your body, your choice. I feel that way about abortion. I feel that way about alcohol. I feel that way about tattoos, piercings. I feel that way about all of it. Um, and the government in no way, shape, or form should ever be telling you what to put, what you can and cannot put into your body or your mind. So with that, for me, I believe that legalization is one of the answers to our overall problem. I do not believe that legalization is a fix all. There's a lot of steps that need to happen in between, before and after legalization. There's a lot of things, a lot of stigmas that we got to defeat. There's a lot of things that we need to address, such as mental health. And that's not just mental health for addicts, that's mental health that leads people to searching for harder drugs to escape to, and then later become addicts. We need to talk about our medical facilities, our healthcare system. There's plenty of people that get on drugs because they are in physical pain, neurological pain, and they're looking for drugs to help them get over the pain that they're going through, because maybe they don't have insurance, maybe this, that, or the other thing, right? Maybe they started on prescription drugs and now they can no longer get a hold of those prescription drugs, but because pharmaceuticals are built the way they are, and their marketing schemes are built the way that it is, they want you to get hooked on their drugs, and they want you to go seek out a doctor that'll write you a prescription for it so that they can get paid for you to take their drug. So it's, it behooves them to hook you on it. And then you can't get that prescription anymore, so you go find the street version of it.
That's a really excellent point, and it also brings into question the way that our healthcare system works and the way that private and public companies can essentially lobby to the medical industry. Hey, take my drug, put my drug on the front line. I want every mouth in America eating a Vicodin 3 times a day whenever they're in pain, and I'll get you a kickback for it.
And that's a strictly America thing. I've been living overseas for 7 years now, 6-7 years. I don't see ads for medicine. That's not a thing. It's just not, unless, the most ads I've seen for medicine has been in this last year, and it's all been go get vaccinated, which global pandemic, that's acceptable, right? But I mean, you don't see no Cialis ads, there's no Viagra ads, but there's also none of those ads that, it's got all the white people that are walking around in those fields of flowers and they look all so happy, and it's, about gout or something like that, right? There's no medicine like that. They don't have those. And then they got the guy who talks really fast in the last 10 seconds of the commercial. They don't have those here anywhere overseas that I've been. So that's a strictly America thing.
So I have a question.
America being
So as you were
gonna
speaking, and you're both talking about, yes, legalization is the answer. Um, one of the things that came to mind, right, is what happens with legalization, right? Because if we legalize marijuana, I mean, not marijuana, but drugs, period, right? Marijuana, meth, heroin, crack, ecstasy, all of that. What happens to agencies like the DEA, or organizations that solely exist to no, just so
Arrivederci. Let's talk about the DEA. Let's talk about the DEA. You want to talk about the militarization of police? Like, that's all DEA. Let's talk about, the whole just fabricating lies about all sorts of, like, the whole coyotes are getting drugs over the border. That's a lie. So as per, hold on, I got it here. As per Jasper Gilliard with the Migration Policy Institute, he states that illegal immigrants that do come across the border with drugs on them are normally sent over by the cartel just to waste the Border Patrol and DEA's time. Like, they're a waste. They can go. They are an archaic, just they're a time of Nixon. Nixon's gone. DEA needs to be gone.
I'll say this. Somebody actually just put in the comments, as far as like the DEA, what would happen to them if legalized. Like, but if it's regulated, they could still, they being the DEA, could still bust illegal manufacturers. So I guess
FDA does that.
You said who?
Yeah, but
FDA does that.
Even if you can't get rid of the entire department altogether, it's the same way that I'm sure Chris feels about the Department of Homeland Security. It's an unnecessary part of America right
Five.
now and get rid of it. We need the money in other places. And the fact that we waste it on things that make almost completely no difference. I mean, what's the point? When's the last time you heard of somebody being prosecuted on a kingpin statute or in a RICO case? It very rarely happens. And when it does happen, it's usually some figurehead person who's just being put away, and the organization is still making bukus of money. Legalization has been proven statistically in every aspect to lower illegal movement of drug use.
I have a question for
and
you
it's
specifically.
non-disputable. There's almost a decade. There's almost a decade of evidence to support it.
Um, and so Chris, you can answer this too if you want to, but I'm specifically asking you, Andrew. Um, and I'm not trying to suggest that you don't care about people or anything like that. I know that you do. But would you say that your biggest reasoning factoring behind being for the legalization is because how much money it'll save the United States? Like, you think it's the most
I wouldn't
economical,
say that it's.
responsible thing to do?
I wouldn't say that it's the most important. People are the most important factor. People make up America, but wouldn't it make more sense for people to have a safe way to do something that they're gonna do anyway?
Right. Okay. So essentially, it's so funny how often like we use different arguments like and just transplant what the conversation is. So like with the whole gun conversation, it's like, well, if you make it illegal, people are still going to get guns anyways. If you make drugs illegal, people are still going to get drugs. They're still going to do drugs. Why not make it safe and regulated and controlled? And
You take advantage of the resources that you have, and as a government, the fact that we can't do that is honestly one of the most embarrassing things I can think of, because they have already shown in a few states where they legalize recreational marijuana, for instance, the amount of revenue that comes back from that is incredible. The fact that the crime rate drops significantly in those states within a few years after the legalization of recreational marijuana use, just against people who are, simple possession and minor intent to distribute. Some guy's driving down the road, gets pulled over with an ounce on him. Well, he just got 8 years for an intent to distribute charge when he probably didn't even intend to distribute that ounce. That was probably his ounce. Let's be honest.
probably was.
So
Yes, sir.
when we talk about the economic impact of ending the war on drugs, talking about absolutely, if not eliminating, definitely downsizing the DEA. One of the major things that we need to talk about is all that money that is saved. Sure, it's money that we're not spending, right? And when I say it's money that we're not spending, it's money that we're not being taxed, right? Of that money that we are saving, not spending, right? There's also a huge amount of revenue that opens up with taxation, of controlled taxation of those goods, right? So not only are we removing the profit of terrorist organizations and illegal cartels, we are also taking that money and using it for ourselves. And when I say using it for ourselves, we reallocate it into rehabilitation programs, mental health programs, creating safe drugs, so we know that things aren't laced with fentanyl, which we know kills people. Fentanyl might be one of the few things that I'm like, okay, that doesn't need to be made legal. We can just go ahead and talk about eradicating fentanyl altogether, just because of the dangers it has to the general population. It'd be like saying, the Second Amendment allows people to have nuclear weapons. In my mind, it's just fentanyl needs to go. But with all that revenue that we make, save, and then also make, there's going to be all sorts of programs that we can go on and continue. Talk about all the money that can go into schools to better educate our children, maybe get our education system out of the freaking dump. Money that can go into hospitals so that we can better handle when people overdose, because we always talk about Narcan and all of that kind of stuff, and like how hospitals are flooded with ODing druggies, right? Well, What if there was a safe place that could happen with a nurse on standby, like ready to take care of it? And what if that insulin that everybody's complaining about, that, oh, Narcan's this much and insulin is this much, what if drug money made insulin cheaper? You know, but
well, let's be
a
honest.
huge net
Insulin
of
is
things.
extremely cheap to make. It's extremely cheap to make end product, and the fact that it's so expensive is only in this country that I'm aware of, because big pharma is, they're trying to make money. I mean, you know, capitalistic society, and we're not true capitalistic society the way we're set up now, but ideally you could make different companies compete with prices to be affordable to the public, using the money that the government would be making and saving from these ideas. And it's not far-fetched by any stretch of the imagination. If a vial of insulin costs $6.50 to make, you can sell it for $10 and make, you know, 70 some odd % profit, as opposed to selling it for $650 and making whatever percentage of profit that is, because that is absolutely ridiculous and unfair to the American people.
Yeah. Like,
another big, you know, factor of saving money. And when we talk about saving money, like most of the time when we talk about saving money in America, generally we're talking about how it's going to hurt the general person, right? Okay, well, the company needs to save money. Somebody's getting laid off. Well, the United States needs to save money. Okay, well, there's about to be some government employees laid off. Military is probably going to downsize. Somebody gets hurt, right? When we talk about saving money. But when we talk about legalizing drugs and we end the war on drugs, there's very few people who get hurt, like really, right? Because of in 2006, the White House's National Drug Control Strategy Program stated that Mexican cartels received somewhere around $13.8 billion in revenue, and that 61%, about $8 billion, is directly associated to marijuana, right? So that's $8.1 billion coming across the border from Mexican cartels of marijuana. And we have mandatory minimums of people that are sitting in jail for weed. What? That's dumb. Like, let's not get into the constitutional, argument that could be had over peyote. Like, weed, mandatory minimum, and we're putting people who have literally an ounce on them. You know what? Let's be honest. If you had a pound of weed, what are you going to do with that? If it came from an ethical source, if it didn't come from Mexico, what are you going to do with a pound of weed?
You're going to go back to work because you're broke after buying a pound of weed.
So the true answer there, Andrew, if you like people, is you call your friends.
I mean, yeah. Like, you. Also, too, one of the things too that I found, so a couple years ago, my wife and I were heading out to Utah, and we drove. We stopped in Colorado. We stopped in a dispensary in Colorado, and in the dispensary, I was just like so blown away because the prices were significantly less than what I was used to paying. It was like, are you serious? Like, this is the price? So I think one of the things that you'll also see though with the legalization is the price coming down to a more affordable range.
How many people need their cut to make sure that you get your marijuana, right? First, it's got to come over whoever, whatever poor soul in Mexico has to live through god awful, living situations to grow that marijuana, package that marijuana, get it over the border, then get it from the main supplier to the many mules that it goes out to, then to the, feeding it down. It keeps just siphoning it down until your guy gives it to you. How many people have had a cut at that point? Of course, the cut, everybody's cut. gets pushed onto the consumer, of course it's going to be more expensive. If it's just the government to you versus, or I'm sorry, not government to you, because the government shouldn't control anything. But if it's just from the business to you, right? Maybe a vending machine in between you. Significantly less cuts need to be made.
So I think like the biggest thing that I'm getting from this conversation, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm mishearing you guys, but it's legalization ultimately kills drug culture.
No,
Legalization is going to be a major part of what kills illegal drug culture, not all of drug
part.
culture. But
Correct.
so you want to talk about cutting cartels' throats in a sense financially? You legalize drugs, they have almost no way to make profit or incentive on the way they get their drugs across. Which, by the way, most people suspect is through the United States government in some sort of sleazy, backhanded way, the same way they brought crack cocaine to the streets of New York in the 80s and 90s to get people addicted so that they could continue selling their product and through third party ventures make a lot of extra money. Now you legalize everything, and even if you have, certain restrictions on it, plus taxation or tariffs, whatever the case is, you know that you're getting a legal and safe product at that point, and you are cutting the throats of the cartel by not allowing them to make all of the profit off of something like that. And they're going to lose their incentive to continue trying to do it, or they'll find other ventures.
And make sure not to forget the moral change here, right? And we're Americans. We like to think that we're the greatest thing God's given to the earth. Let's make sure that we talk about the moral impact of legalizing marijuana or legalizing all drugs is going to have, right? Starting all the way in Colombia, you've got these cartels that control these people's lives and have them living in not good situations. It's not like the guys who are out there working the cocaine farms. They're not exactly living good lives. I mean, we've all seen the pictures. We've all seen Narcos at this point, right? Like, we're all caught up. They're not living good situations, and those cartels are bloody. And if you can have ethical drugs, and I know that's a weird thing to say, ethical drugs, where they're sourced from, that somebody didn't have to stand naked in a packing room to make sure that they didn't slip out with any of the drugs. Like, isn't there a moral stance that we should probably be taking on that one as well? And I know we keep saying cartels, right? It's important to also know that the cash cow, the golden goose of terrorism, where they get a majority of their money, is opium. The UN did a study in 2006. It showed that Afghanistan traffickers made an estimate of 3.1 billion US dollars on opium. And for perspective, in 2004, the UN showed that one Latin American country, not specified, I can only go as far as the study lets you research. The UN study showed that one Latin American country exported 400 tons of cocaine, making 2 billion, so less than Afghanistan made on opium. And it brings up a question of how much of that 3.1 was controlled by or funded terrorism. And let's not fuck around. 1% of that $3.1 billion is a lot of money.
Well, let's be honest. At the end of the day, for every party involved there, it's always about making money. That's what it always is. And opium is probably the easiest of all the ways to make money in this aspect with different drugs, especially recreational drugs, because opium is used as a painkiller. And we've already, well, not we as the United States, there have already been 2 wars in the last 100 years against opium and against China. And originally the US government did this really as a racist thing to come out against Chinese immigrants. But at the same time, opium is extremely addicting in all forms, and it causes a mental sickness within your body that you can't shake. It's a physical effect that comes afterwards, and it's been noted throughout history for almost 1,200 years now that once you start using opium on a regular basis, you can't just stop. Your body won't let you just stop. So if I'm looking for a way to make money and continue making money, well, hey, I get all these people hooked on opium. Now they have to come to me if I'm the only source. And it seems like a really easy and viable way for someone in that situation to make a whole lot of money, which is what it's about for these people at the end of the day. It's not about the drugs, it's about the money they're making from the drugs.
So I kind of want to backtrack a bit. So we kind of covered how the legalization affects some aspects of drug culture, right? Like the cartels and funding terrorism, and how legalization would lead to more money and things of that nature. But when I asked the question, does legalization kill drug culture? You both basically said it kills some aspects of it. It kills the legal drug culture, right? So I kind of want to talk about what the legalization doesn't do for drug culture. So what is that looking like?
So simply legalizing it doesn't exactly answer all of the causes of drug culture, right? Like people who get addicted, generally speaking, they didn't just think to themselves one day, hey, I'm gonna just start shooting up heroin, right? Like, no, they were running from something, right? And they were looking for something to take them away. It was an escape, right? Like, I'm not saying every time. I'm sure there are cases of people who did in fact just go looking for the run, right? The thrill. But plenty of people are escaping something, whether that's an abusive house, whether that's pain because they didn't have insurance and they just feel pain. They were looking for something to numb. Maybe it was a mental health thing where they're just being worked to the bone and they just need some way to fall asleep. Like, these are all things that we have in America that we experience on a daily basis. Is it really that crazy to think to ourselves, maybe somebody else needed something a little bit more than a beer or a glass of wine? And I know that there's a few people where it's not just a glass of wine, it's a bottle of wine. And really, what's the difference between, popping a bunch of painkillers and drinking an entire bottle of wine? It's at certain points, right? If you're drinking an entire bottle of wine every night, destroying your liver, what's the difference? You're still numbing yourself. You're just addicted to a different drug.
I feel like part of the drug culture in general is that people are addicted to different things. They're addicted to things in different ways also. A lot of people, they have to have their cup of coffee every day. And if they don't, you have a headache within an hour of waking up. A lot of people feel that way about whatever it is that they're addicted to, cigarettes or coffee, alcohol, candy, whatever it can be. And that's a whole nother topic that we mentioned earlier, was talking about sugar. Sugar is the most addictive force on the planet by a long shot. And it's honestly insurmountable at this point because it is such an ingrained part of our livelihoods at this point that I don't know that we'll ever be able to cure that. And with
The
that
sugar
being said,
lobbies used to be bigger than oil lobbies.
well, with that being said, people have needs, and the way that our country and honestly the world is set up now is more faster always. So I work in a job right now. Presently, I'm getting ready to go to work after we're done with this call. I work 84 hours a week, 10 and a half months a year. I work 84 hours a week. That's 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, at least every week. So I'd say probably a third of the people that I work with are on some type of methamphetamines. And my industry is also very strict. You can't miss time. You don't get to miss days. You don't get to go to appointments. If you do, you might not get fired, but you'll be the first one laid off at the end of a short-term job. You'll be the first one in trouble. You'll be reprimanded, maybe not directly, but indirectly. And so people do what they feel like they have to do to get by in life. So they get the methamphetamine so that they can make it through another 12-hour shift when your body's exhausted. Or they get the cocaine because they need to stay awake for that drive to get to the next job that starts in the morning that's 12 hours away. Or, they get the marijuana because they need a way to relax at the end of a long week. I mean, there are so many unknown reasons why people find these substances. And it's important to remember that our culture hasn't helped with these stances in the way that people feel like they have to be a certain way to continue to get along in this environment. And it's mentally draining, physically draining, and emotionally exhausting trying to keep up with it. Now, I personally have avoided these things in my work area, but I'm still pretty young. There's a lot of guys in my industry that are in their 50s and even 60s who are still out here doing hard physical labor every day, and they need that boost to get them by. They feel like they need that boost to keep them going throughout a 84-hour work week.
So I'm kind of wondering as I'm listening, right? Because when I was looking up what drug culture is, in an oversimplified way of putting it, drug culture is the normalization of the use of drugs to and how it impacts our society and how it influences us, right? And as I'm thinking about like what it means to be a part of drug culture or to be in a drug culture, and then what it would mean to be a culture who legalized drugs, I feel like legalizing them would lead to normalizing them. But as you're saying, it doesn't eliminate some of the issues in life that cause the dependency. And
Well,
like,
I think that maybe open up your mind on the idea for a little bit instead of thinking about it in just a drug related way as to the drugs that we're talking about right now. Think about it as every person on the planet, every person in the country, every person in our community, they want to be a better version of themselves. They want to be a stronger, faster, staying awake later, going to bed later, getting up earlier, being more productive member of society. And drugs are a way for them to make that happen in their minds. And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But I think it can be on a really personal level that drug culture is just a way for us all to make ourselves what we feel is a better version of ourselves. And I say that in a way that if I'm in pain, I take pain medicine because I don't want to be in pain anymore so that I can continue to be a productive member of society. If I am tired, I want cocaine because I need a way to stay awake so that I can continue to be productive to my community or my job or my family, whatever it is. So, and I could be wrong, but maybe the drug culture isn't just about the illegal drugs that we're talking about. Because you got to remember that a lot of the things that we've talked about today used to be illegal and are not illegal anymore. So you got to think that 100 or 200 years from now in this country, that it seems pretty likely that all the illegal drugs that we're dealing with now are going to be legal at some point down this road. And the effect that's going to have on everyday people in their lives and why they're using the drugs that they're using.
so is what you're saying like kind of more? Let's stop talking about the drug aspect of it and let's more focus on the why, so that we can address the why because it's coming regardless. That's fair.
Say that again.
I said you're kind of basically saying like let's stop so much addressing the the drug aspect of it, whatever drug any person wants to address, and let's more so look at the why aspect of it because it's coming regardless. Like this person,
Yeah,
whether this person
yeah,
is doing
absolutely. I
crack
mean,
or
isn't that the biggest thing? Aren't people the most important thing? I mean, doesn't that make the most sense? Like if somebody goes to AA because they,
like that's a whole
are
other
addicted to
conversation.
alcohol, if somebody goes to AA because they're addicted to alcohol, I mean, I've never been through the 12-step program, but I imagine that the basis of the program is you trying to figure out what's wrong, what you need to do to fix it in a moral and responsible way, and how you can do it and accomplish these goals without the use of alcohol. Am I correct?
Yes.
So wouldn't it make sense to handle all addictions in the same manner?
It would. Now, why we don't? That's
Wait a
another
second,
conversation.
Andrew. Are you trying to say, now hear me out, are you trying to say that maybe addiction is a mental health issue and that maybe Americans need to address mental health in some way and that drugs and alcohol aren't just the devil?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it really well earlier, Chris, and you're saying it again right now. Mental health and coping mechanisms seem to be the two bases for, I mean, drug culture in general, no matter how you look at drug culture, either the sugar or the opium or the alcohol, whatever it is. And I don't think, honestly, that there's any way you can get rid of all of the stress for everybody. You know, we're never going to be wandering around singing "This Is a Wonderful Life" to each other, you know, in unison with uniforms and everything like that. But
If we do enough
if we
drugs,
can at least get a handle, if we at least get a handle on the situation, maybe we can begin as a country to understand why and do something about it, make a corrective course.
Hmm. I wonder what is culture's role, right? And I'm not trying to like blame anybody or anything like that, but something that so as you were saying that you Chris, I think you made a joke of, you just if we did a lot of drugs, and it made me think of a movie, and then it made me think of a song, which is exactly how my brain works, right? So the movie that came to mind was I don't know if you guys have ever seen Across the Universe, but that's like
Oh, that's my favorite movie, Charlie. Come on.
like that movie is so trippy, right? And then it
No, it's not trippy at all. You follow the Beatles
man,
musical journey, man. It's a
man, that movie's trippy. All right, like granted, I haven't seen it in a while. I'll probably watch it again soon. The last time I saw it though, like I'm pretty sure I was like 16. I was high, and I had no clue what was going on. It's almost as trippy as what's that one with Halle Berry and Bruce Willis and it's like 20 different like versions of them throughout life. That's a trippy one too. I'm gonna have to look that up. But
Atlas, Cloud Atlas.
at Cloud Atlas, yeah,
Cloud Atlas is what you're thinking of.
yeah,
Tom
like
Hanks. Tom
yeah,
Hanks,
Tom
not
Hanks,
Bruce
not Bruce
Willis.
Willis, yeah,
Tom
that one.
Hanks.
So it made me think of that, and then not so much a
It's all
song,
right.
like
You
I
can't you
started
can't mess up
thinking,
a Halle Berry movie.
I started thinking of, so I was thinking of Across the Universe, and then I started thinking of uh I started to think of a Lil Wayne song, but then I just thought of Lil Wayne in general. And I'm not coming for him in any way, shape, or form. But thinking about him made me think about music, musicians, rappers, rock stars, and stuff like that, where they glamorize and they do the use of drugs. And so I wonder what it like how does pop culture tie into that in the conversation of legalization? Like, if we legalize, but then we
Normalization.
still glamorize the usage of these things without it being very clear, because it's like, oh yeah, I'm about to pop this or smoke this, and it's not really like, yo, I'm like dying on the inside, and I'm doing this so I can escape. Now,
I
like,
think
that's
that
not a good
after
song.
50 something years
But
that of
I think the goal at the end of the day is you want people to treat these drugs once they become legalized the same way that they treat when they go pop their blood pressure pills. Like you want your if you absolutely need these things, that you should be able to go without taboo and do what you feel like you have to do to keep yourself as part of society.
So, are you kind of?
And
I know.
the
Maybe this is a weird.
glamorization, as you say, by the music industry and pop culture industry, I think started out in the 70s, the 80s, even the late 60s. People who are using it to escape the downfalls of fame that they didn't realize existed at the time has morphed into nowadays this extreme glamorization of I'm popping Molly or whatever it is to appeal to a younger generation and continue to be relevant in the music and entertainment industry.
Okay, and so what I kind of took from what you just said was like I heard you, but this is what I took. By legalizing it and it becoming as normal as blood pressure medicine or diabetes medicine, it's not going to be cool enough to rap about or put in a rock song, thusly eliminating the glamorization. Like that's what I took of it, because it's like I immediately tried to hear like my favorite rapper rapping about taking his diabetes medication, and like that doesn't work, bro. Like,
but we still sing about popping bottles. What's the difference? What's the difference between coming home and having a joint and coming home and popping a beer? Like truly, you
no,
shouldn't be driving after either, right? Like you should probably wait until you're till you're kind of mellowed back down. You got to make sure you reach those legal limits, and you're like, what is responsible before operating
Right.
heavy machinery? Like, what's really the difference
I
between
think one of the hardest
drinking
things
a
that
six pack?
to do when you're having this conversation, right? Because you brought up the alcohol, you brought up the weed, and I feel like alcohol is so normal for us where it's like I grew up and there was alcohol, like there wasn't just alcohol lying around, but alcohol was legal for you if you were 21. So it was very readily accessible. So it was normal. You very early on learn your limits, where you can go, where you can't go with it. Um, Cigarettes, or well, that's a different story because it's addicting, but it's not like crack. And I think maybe just the stigma about crack because it's not legal. You're like, yo, like crack. It's not the same as like when I think when people think of going home and smoking a joint, it's viewed very differently than going home and smoking a crack rock. Like I think it is, and I think the way that we view it is a lot to do with the drug culture and then the legalization aspect. Because again, you can talk all day about legalization, but when people hear, yo, we need to legalize crack, we need to legalize meth, you're like, what? Why would you legalize crack? Why would you legalize meth? Like, forget
So
crack
Well,
kills.
let's be honest. Let's be honest. Meth is already legal. I mean, have you seen the medicine that they put kids on that have ADHD? I mean, it's already legal. It just isn't completely legal. So if they were manufacturing it in a safe and productive way, it would be better for our country, our society, our worldwide society to at least know that people who feel like they need it are not going to be tabooed. People who need it are not going to be put out over it.
So that's one of the things I kind of wanted to interject with when you were talking about the glamorization of drugs, right? We've spent the war on drugs has been going on for 52 years. And you could argue that it's been going on for 54 years, right? Like, we've done a really good job of demonizing people and drugs and making you be bad if you do drugs, and you're going to amount to nothing. Marijuana is going to make you deflate into the couch. We've all seen the Dare commercials. We've all seen all of the Officer McGruff. We've done a really good job of that. Like, Americans are really, like, for all the crap we give other countries, we do a really good propaganda game. We make propaganda seem natural and seem okay and just seem just so like low key. We did a really good job of demonizing drugs for the last 50 years. Maybe we need some glamorization to bring it back up to normal so that it can be normal.
That's an interesting point. So that it's not, okay, weed is cool, but that's crack.
Right. Like,
Weed is
why
cool,
not?
but you're talking meth, bro. Okay. I, yeah, that's, you know, so, very interesting perspective. Didn't think about it like that, Andy. Oh, she was talking to Andrew. I was talking to Chris. That's wow. That's interesting, man. So what?
Somebody was talking to me.
How do we get to? No, it was a comment that I was reading, and I thought it was to Chris because what he said like blew my mind. But apparently, you blew somebody's mind. I guess anything happens here at the world could wait, right? um. So how do we accomplish legalization, man? I feel like with a lot
Stop being sticks in the mud.
right, and that's what I
Get
was
over
gonna
the
say.
red
It's
versus blue.
like with a lot of things, we're so traditional, right? Like we have to go about it red versus blue way. We have to go about it the way that we've always gone about it. And I feel like that's only going to just delay the process and more people are going to get dead, more people are going to get lost in the healthcare system trying to get clean, like all of these different things.
So one of the things that I think our generation, and when I say our generation, I mean we're all of the same generation. Our generation and the generations after us, what we really need to do right now and be conscious of, and I believe that we are, don't fall into the red versus blue trap. Like, are there times to side with the Reds? Maybe. Are there times to side with the Blues? Maybe. But don't fall into that I am a red, I am a blue. Go with who's going to get us in the right direction. And sometimes that person isn't red or blue. They might be gold, they might be purple, like they might be constitutionalists, they might be libertarians, they might be the Green Party. And I understand, like me, I'm not Green Party, but I would vote Jill Stein over some of these crazies. Like Jill Stein would get it all legalized. if we were one topic voting, like I'd probably pick Jill Stein over Trump or Biden.
What about you, Andrew? How do we legalize it with our society being the way that they are?
I don't think that it would be an easy process, and honestly, it would need to start with the House and Senate. And you know how I feel about term limits. You know how I feel about basically most of the politicians that we have in office nowadays.
I do not know, Andrew. Please tell me how you feel about term limits.
Oh, I'm all about term limits.
Like Charlie. That's a different conversation.
Yeah, you're right. That's why I was trying to avoid rushing into it too hard. But yeah, I've been all for 8-year term limits for quite a long time now, a lot longer than quote unquote Ted Cruz has been. But anyway, I'll leave that alone. Yeah, so I think that by replacing the House and Senate with fresh heads and fresh ideas, especially coming from a younger generation, as some people in our generation are now old enough to make and hold these positions, that things will begin to change. That being said, it's also really important to get out and vote, and really important to get people who share like-minded ideas, and like Chris said, not get into the red versus blue trap that we live in nowadays, the two-party system trap that we are constantly struggling in. And not just the House and Senate, but the presidency also. Now, on a personal level, I feel like whoever the president is should make no difference. The fact that I even know his name is maybe not ridiculous, but it doesn't make any sense because the president isn't supposed to have any kind of power. So reining back the president's powers of executive order and changing out the House and Senate on a constant basis with fresh heads and fresh ideas would be a great start toward getting goals like these accomplished.
Decentralize government and start having more states' rights. States need to be making these moves. You get one cook in the kitchen, right? And that one cook makes, yeah. If one cook messes up, if you have one cook in the kitchen, one cook messes up, you have a shit meal, right? But if you've got 50 cooks in 50 different kitchens, you're sure to get at least one 5-star meal, right? And then after that 5-star meal is out there, all them other cooks can look over and be like, how do you do that?
Follow the recipe. Look at you out here dropping dope metaphors. That's what's up, man. Well, I'm not going to take too much more of your guys' time. Thank you for joining for this conversation. This was really dope. I picked the perfect two people. I was like, who do I know that could just come up here and talk about this enough to where I don't have to say anything and I still look good? And I was like, these two guys. So thank you for coming up here, sharing your expertise, sharing your perspectives, your opinions. We didn't really get into experiences, but that's cool because this was a different conversation. But yeah, thank you guys so much. Really quickly before we go, if we could get some closing thoughts from you guys. Let me give you both 90 seconds to just share your closing thoughts. You know what they are. So I don't got to explain to you how closing thoughts work. Final thoughts, closing thoughts.
You first, Andrew.
I mean, my closing thoughts are basically the same as what we've already talked about. I mean, I've had my share of experiences with drugs and with addiction in general. I mean, you saw even during this show, I just woke up right before the show started, so I'm having my morning cigarettes. I'm drinking my morning coffee. Those are addictions, and addiction is what creates and maintains a drug culture. So if you want to talk about drug culture, again, you have to make the source and find out the problems and the reasons. Now, for me, I started smoking at a young age, so for me, it's just a habit now, and it's one that I am looking to break, and I'm working on that goal presently. But to change the way our country feels about drug use and rehabilitation and mental health, all it takes is a little bit of digging. Look into our past, look into other cultures' histories with drug use and rehabilitation, see that it works, and see that for sure 100% that all the things that we have been doing with the war on drugs and everything prior to that, especially prohibition, has not worked. We know that it doesn't work. So the next logical step is to try something we haven't done before. And maybe that'll work. And maybe it won't. But hopefully it would.
One of the big things is that if we can get over this whole prohibition of drugs and the war on drugs, it's going to help us out as Americans just from the get-go. This mandatory minimums, the incarceration that is predominantly affecting Black and brown people of the United States. When we talk about people who are profiting off of all of the drug war, privatized incarceration is definitely probably, I would say, number 3 on that list of people who are making bank. Cartels and terrorism being the first two. The militarization of police and police having all of these military toys with none of the military training, that's because of the war on drugs. We could reverse that too. On a grander scale, the morals and the ethical impact that we could have with legalizing drugs and getting over the war on drugs from the impact that we've already had on South America and Central America, and the future impact terrorists from the Middle East, such as Afghanistan, could have on other countries or our own. Figure it out. There's plenty of smart people in the world. Vote for them. Let's figure it out. Stop doing the same thing that we've been doing for the last 50-something years.
Okay, so I will close us with these thoughts. We just got to open up our minds to more, to better, and to different, right? One of the things that I've experienced my whole life is like anytime or more often than not, when you're in conversations with people about more and better and different, the most common response is to approach it with disbelief, right? That can never happen. And so then we just ultimately settle for what's been happening, right? As Andrew said, as Chris said throughout the entirety of this conversation, prohibition does not work. I'm not suggesting that legalization is the answer. Maybe it is. I think it's definitely worth trying. like and that's the thing. So if we open ourselves up to more, to different, to better, we can accomplish those things. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take more of us opening ourselves up to the idea of maybe we have to be those better politicians that we want. I mean, and I don't want to get too deep into a whole bunch of other stuff because I could. But yeah, that's just really it. Like, just open up your minds and explore other options. The way you've always done things, the way things have always been done, it's not the only way that things can get done. And especially if it's not working, why wouldn't we change? With that, I'm going to close this out in some prayer, and we'll catch you tomorrow. God, we just thank you for this dope conversation that we were able to have. No pun intended. Um, I just pray that we would open ourselves up to more and to better and to different, whatever that looks like in our personal lives, and that as we do that, you would just move. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you once again, guys, for joining this conversation. I appreciate you both. Thank you to all of our viewers out there. If you haven't already, go over to our page, find our link tree, follow us on all the platforms, turn the notifications on. We love hearing from you in the comments and in messages and all that good stuff. We'll be back tomorrow with another dope conversation on drug culture.